Bank of England is still expected to raise rates for the 14th successive time this week.
Well, joining us now is property strategist and co-founder of GreenResi Anna Clare Harper. Is it GreenResi?
GreenResi,
as in residence, yeah. What's happening there? I mean, are things going to get more expensive, or are we suddenly going to see things evening out?
Things, unfortunately, are already getting more expensive in quite a sudden way. There's about 2 million people living in homes which are either on variable rate mortgages or on fixed rates which are coming to an end by the end of this year. And the problem for them is it's not a marginal increase, it's not an inflation increase, it's a 2 or 3 times increase in the cost of housing, which many people can ill afford at a time where inflation has been creeping up. So, unfortunately, things are getting a lot more expensive anyway. This is a positive sign in the short term because we need a bit more stability in the short to medium term in the housing market, but it's not necessarily enough for many of those people who are on variable or
no, because you always borrow to the very limit, don't you? Yeah. And maybe just above the limit almost. Yeah.
And it's interesting how, historically, interest rates are a way of suppressing an economy that's out of control, normally by people kind of splurging money. But that's not what's happening now. This is basically, as we just discussed then, people are having to spend more money on utilities. They're having to spend more money on food, the day-to-day grind. Why are we persisting in rising interest rates? It's punishing people at both ends.
And the reason for that is because the Bank of England is supposed to be independent and reaching a target of inflation which is a lot lower than where we are today. But the knock-on effects on, for example, people's ability to have a quality of life that they've adjusted to, or their ability to spend money, their consumer spending, which again impacts economic growth, and also house prices, are all at risk in the context of increasing interest rates because everything gets more expensive.
Do we have any idea how many people are at that very limit where they were only just getting by with their mortgage payments, but any difference now is going to tip them over the edge and possibly into, I don't know, having to sell the house or some sort of negative equity problem?
There's definitely a substantial amount of people. I don't know an exact figure of how many people are just on the edge, but actually this coming to the end of your fixed rate puts you way above the edge, right? There are plenty of people whose salaries don't cover the new mortgage cost, which does then mean that in the short term we can expect a bit of volatility in the housing market because people who need to sell for any price. And you're seeing reductions. Some of the investors we're working with are buying at 20, 30, 40% below 2022
that's
values.
That's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Because that's the only price that they can pay with higher interest rates available, and it's the only people need to sell.
Yeah, a mate of mine who I went for a drink with on the other day, he had a second house in London. He was keeping as his retirement, and he came back to London and sold it. And he got a lower price today than he was offered 10 years ago.
No!
Yeah, even in London, which you think would be kind of inflation-proof, because simply it's so expensive to borrow the finance now. It's people are having to factor that in with stamp duty, so it's actually suppressing the house price. But let's be positive. Bricks and mortar is still something that we should cherish and keep faith with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's best seen as a long-term either investment or purchase and treated as such. And it's a kind of curiosity in the UK that we have shorter term fixed rate mortgages, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Whereas if you look at the Danish market, for example, they fix rates at much lower rates for much longer, which means that the market is more stable and you don't have these swings. Every 2 years when you come to the end of your fixed rate, you're subject to, actually interest rates have increased for a short-term reason, which is to control inflation, and it fundamentally affects the ability of the people who live in those properties, renters and homeowners alike, to be able to pay for their lifestyle.
I mean, you're a property strategist, which is an interesting term in itself, but it means, I presume, you take the long-term view.
Very much so.
So if you take a long-term view, although we're clearly going through an awful time at the moment, and a very uncertain time, will things ultimately get better? I mean, I say to my sons, I'm trying to, because they're so uptight about whether they'll ever be able to own a house and things like that. I say, just wait, in 10 years' time it really won't feel this bad. You're panicking now. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I think longer term, it's still a rosy picture, but in order to reach that rosy picture, we need to invest for the long term. And one of the problems in the housing market is years of underinvestment.
Lack of stock.
That's part of it, but 98% of the homes we use in 5 years already exist, and we don't really invest in that stock. It lowers in quality, and a lot of it is not very energy efficient. So about 60%, the rental market is really the sector I know the most about. About 60% of those homes don't meet the planned minimum energy efficiency standards, and about 23% fail to meet decent home standards. So we really need to invest in that stock and invest for the long term, and the kind of clients we work with are investors who are looking at that long-term social and environmental improvement.
So that's going to be a big sales thing, is it? In 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, when you want to sell a house, it's going to matter to the people looking around your house that your house is energy efficient.
Energy efficient and higher quality. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And what we don't want, Anna, is, as we're seeing in Scotland, the SNP, for example, is saying you have to install a £10,000 heat pump or you can't sell your home. I think this, back to the previous conversation, people are on board with this, but they don't want to be punished. They want more carrot and less stick.
Yeah, absolutely. Story of the housing market. There's been a lot of stick and not much carrot, in particular for the people who need to put capital in for the long term.
But there used to be great government subsidies for you if you wanted to. There used to be if you wanted to put solar panels on your roof, for instance, and that disappeared. Maybe we do need a bit of government impetus there to actually help us look at energy efficient ways.
Well, and they need to decide exactly what they want to do and commit to it before they can do that.
Oh my goodness, here we go again.
Yes.
It's the same old problem.
It is, actually.
OK, Anna Clare Harper, co-founder of GreenResi, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.